Welcome to O'Neill and Brennan's online manual handling course. The content of today's course will include legislation, personal protective equipment, the structures of the back and the principles of safe manual handling. There will also be a questionnaire at the end of the course and a practical demonstration will have to be carried out either on site or in our offices. So if you're sitting comfortably, we will continue. Before I start with the slides, I would just like you to take a few moments and watch a short video. So, just to outline the course objectives today, that you'll be able to assess the potential risks of injury before you carry out manual handling tasks in your workplace. That you'll be able to perform the manual handling tasks safely and without risk of injury. And to heighten your awareness of legislation relating to the manual handling of loads. Let me ask you a question. Why do we need manual handling training? Correct, to protect our backs so we don't injure ourselves. Statistically, 35% of all reported accidents are due to faulty manual handling in the workplace. Most of these accidents result in back injury to the individual. Health and Welfare at Work Act 2005 focuses on the prevention of accidents at work. It significantly increases fines and penalties for breaches of these regulations. Some of you may remember an accident back in the 90s where a young man fell to his death on a building site in Dublin. At the time, the developer was found guilty of breaches of health and safety regulations and was fined a nominal fee for this breach. If this was to happen today, the person responsible would be liable for a €3 million fine or up to 6 months in jail. The aim of this is to encourage a responsible attitude to health and safety by both the employers and the employees. Remember, we all have a part to play with safety on site. It causes huge cost both in human and economic terms. The human terms, to yourself, is painful, possibly crippling back injury. In economic terms, you can't earn good money. There's a cost to the state. There's a cost to your family. Most of these injuries build up over a period of time rather than being the result of a single accident. So, rather than on one occasion lifting something that's too heavy, the injury builds up over a number of years by constantly doing things incorrectly. Eventually, the damage to your discs is done and it herniates, and that's when we have trouble. This can be avoided. If you bend down, if you lift correctly, it's very, very difficult to lift something that's too heavy. Injuries due to manual handling account for 1 in every 3 accidents reported to the HSA on an annual basis. Duties of the employers, Section 8. Insofar as reasonably practical, they must ensure the safety, health and welfare of their employees. They must provide a safe place of work with safe access and egress. All plant and machinery must be checked regularly. Safe systems of work must be implemented, and they must prevent any improper conduct likely to put the employees at risk. Duties of the employers, Section 9. Every employer shall, when providing information to their employees under the section on matters relating to their safety, health and welfare at work, ensure that the information is given in a form, manner and as appropriate language that is reasonably likely to be understood by the employees concerned. They must identify hazards by carrying out risk assessments, which is Section 19. Provide a written safety statement based on the identifications of the hazards and assessment of the risks, Section 20. And facilitate safety representatives, Section 25, and a safety committee, Section 26. Duties of the employees, Section 13. Employees must comply with safety health legislation. Employees must comply with safety and health legislation and must cooperate with their employer, not be under the influence of an intoxicant at the place of work to the extent that the state that they are in is likely to endanger their own safety, health or welfare at work or that of any other person, and they must not engage in any improper conduct or behaviour. They must wear the personal protective clothing and use the equipment provided for their protection and safety. not to do anything which will place themselves or others at risk, and report any defects in workplace, systems or equipment. They must attend training and undergo assessment as required. General Applications Regulations 2007. Regulation 68 is the interpretation of the manual handling of loads, which is any transporting or supporting of a load by one or more employees and includes lifting, putting down, pushing, pulling, carrying or moving a load which, by reasons of its characteristics or of unfavourable ergonomic conditions, involves risk particularly of back injury to employees. Regulation 69. The duties of the employer. The employer must take measures to avoid the need for such manual handling. Where not achievable, mechanical aids and or appropriate organisational methods should be used. They must organise workstations and risk assessments and provide training and information to personnel. So, what kind of mechanical aids can we use to avoid manual handling? So examples of mechanical aids are hand trucks, pallet trucks, forklifts, anything you can use that's designed to move and lift. The General Applications Regulations 2007, Schedule number 3, highlights the risk factors for the manual handling of loads. 1. The characteristic of the load itself. The physical effort required to move the load. The characteristics of the working environment. The requirements of the activity and your own individual risk factors. Manual handling risk assessment. Step 1. You must identify the manual handling task that needs to be assessed. Step 2. Develop a risk assessment schedule. Step 3. Carry out the risk assessment process. Task observation and description. Collect task data. The identification of risk factors. The solution and development and action plan. Step 4. Review the effectiveness of the control measures or solution. Your employer must ensure the particularly sensitive risk groups of employees are protected against any dangers. Pregnant women, young workers, people with reduced mobility, new or inexperienced workers, or persons with serious particular problems. The HSA guidelines. Manual handling training must be given to all personnel on joining a company and within a maximum 3-year period thereafter. Refresher training will also be given in any major changes in the workplace, new equipment or transfers to another work activity. In summary, you are now aware of the relevant manual handling legislation and how this applies in the workplace. Personal protective equipment and clothing. By law, you must wear a helmet, a high-vis and a pair of steel toe cap boots on a building site. The equipment that you wear must comply with certain regulations. Your helmet must comply with CE regulations and must also have clearly stamped on it the date of manufacture. The date of manufacture is important because after 2 years you must dispose of your helmet and replace it with a new one. Your steel toe cap boots also have to comply with regulations. They must have a steel toe cap. They must have ankle protection and support. Furthermore, they must have a steel sole plate and slip resistant soles. Other PPE used on site would be glasses and gloves and earmuffs. Be sure that you have the right piece of equipment when working on site. Employees should use the PPE properly whenever it is required to be used, report any defects in or damage to the PPE immediately, and participate in any training or instruction provided on the PPE. They must inform their employer of any medical conditions they may have that might be affected by the use of the PPE provided to them. Structures of the back. The basic elements of the back and spine are the bones, joints, muscles, tendons, ligaments, and the spine itself, which is the vertebrae and discs. There are 5 parts to our spine: the cervical curve at the top, the thoracic curve in the middle, the lumbar curve at the bottom, and at the base of our spine we have the sacrum and the coccyx. The functions of the spine are that it supports our body and keeps it upright, provides a frame for the ribs and muscles to attach to, protects the spinal cord or column which passes down through it, and transmits the weight down to our lower limbs. Muscles. We use the muscles to perform tasks each day. So what do we know about muscles? Muscles come in groups of twos and work by pulling only. So if I wanted to lift my arm up, my bicep contracts. If I want to put my arm down, my tricep contracts and pulls it back down again. The largest muscles in our body are found in our upper legs, our thigh muscles and our hamstrings. These are the muscles that we should use to lift with, rather than bending our back. Intervertebral discs. These discs separate each vertebrae and act like a cushion, absorbing the shock along our spine. The disc is made of a jelly-like substance known as the nucleus, covered with many strong outer layers called the annulus. The discs do not have a supply of blood vessels, and they depend upon a transfer of fluids, nutrients and oxygen from the bones, which is the vertebrae, above and below them. This transfer of fluid depends on the difference in pressure between the inside of the discs and the surrounding vertebrae and blood vessels. This is why most disc nutrition and regeneration takes place when we lie down and the pressure inside the discs is reduced. Intervertebral discs. Discs separate each vertebrae and act like a cushion, absorbing shock along our spine. The discs are made up of a jelly-like substance known as the nucleus and covered with many strong outer layers called the annulus. Earlier we spoke about how our backs are damaged, not generally by a single act, okay, but over time. If you picture your disc is like an onion with layer upon layer upon layer, as we lift incorrectly, damage is caused to our discs, to each layer. Over time, the damage gets so large that each layer becomes torn and damage starts happening to the layer below. Eventually, if we continue to lift with poor manual handling technique, the very last layer will break and the nucleus will leak out of the disc and press against our spinal cord. The discs do not have a supply of blood vessels, and they depend upon a transfer of fluids, nutrients and oxygen from the bones, which is the vertebrae above and below them. What this means, for example, if you cut your hand, you bleed, your blood carries white oxygen cells, causes a scab, and your hand will heal within a week or so. With your discs, they do not have a direct blood supply, and healing may take many, many months and may not be complete. This transfer of fluid depends on the difference in pressure between the inside of the discs and the surrounding vertebrae and blood vessels. This is why most disc nutrition and regeneration takes place when we lie down and the pressure inside the disc is reduced. So we can see here our intervertebral discs. The light blue area in the middle is the nucleus. The darker blue area on the outside is the annulus. These discs are used to transmit the load, allow our back to bend and twist, to extend and flex, and to rotate. You can see the image on the left hand side is damaged. The nucleus is forcing out of the disc and pressing against the spinal cord. This has happened because the disc is herniated due to poor manual handling technique. Our intervertebral discs are prone to injury and degeneration as we use our backs each day, as they are compressed and torqued through sitting, bending and lifting. The causes of back injury. The two main causes of back injury are poor posture and poor technique. If we address our posture and our technique, if we lift correctly and we stand straight,
we take an awful lot of pressure from our discs. It's to be noted that sitting in a slouched position will increase the pressure on your spine by up to 50%. Other causes of back injury: careless actions and failure to assess. Again, lifting something that's too heavy and lifting it with poor technique will cause an awful lot of damage to your back. The natural aging process: as we all get older, our body doesn't react or respond as it used to. Okay? Disease and illness also can affect our back. And overuse and general wear and tear, once more, will cause trouble to our back. If we have poor posture, poor technique, all of these things are magnified. If we correct our posture and our technique, it limits the amount of wear and tear on our back. The possible effects of manual handling injuries to the individual. First and foremost, you will suffer, you will know if your back has herniated. It will be painful. You will incur medical costs, you will be hospitalised, and you will need physiotherapy for a long time to come afterwards. You will be absent from work, so you'll have a lack of income. Your family life will be affected, as your mobility is affected, as is your social life. All of this can lead to stress, and as we know, stress can lead to depression. And all of this is avoidable by just using something we know from birth, which is how to lift things correctly. So, prevention. What can we do to prevent it in the industry? Posture. Our posture is very important. Good posture, as indicated by the middle image, means that we are standing straight. This means that each of the discs is sharing the load correctly and evenly. In summary, we have covered the structures of the back, how the back can be damaged, and how injury can be prevented. I will now explain the 8 principles of safe lifting. The principles of manual handling are: 1. Assessment. We break this down into 4 parts: task, individual, load and environment. Tile. We must know what the task is. We must be sure that the individual is capable of safely carrying out the task. We must know what the load is and the environment that the load is going to be carried in. 2. Take a broad, stable base. 3. Bend your knees. 4. Keep your back in a natural position. 5. Take a firm palm of grip. 6. Keep your arms in line with the trunk of your body. 7. Keep the weight close to your centre of gravity. And finally, 8. Move your feet in the direction of movement. So, task. Does the task involve holding the load away from the trunk of your body, twisting, stooping or reaching upwards, carrying long distances, repetitive handling, or strenuous pushing or pulling? You must weigh up each of these individual risks and decide whether it is safe to perform the task. The individual. Is the individual unsuited to the task, wearing unsuitable clothing or footwear, or inexperienced and lacking in knowledge and training? If this is the case, then he is not the right individual to carry out the task. Load. Is the load heavy, bulky or awkward, difficult to grasp, unstable or harmful, e.g. sharp, hot, etc. Environment. What is the working environment like? Are there poor lighting conditions? Are there constraints on your posture? What are the conditions of the floors? Are there variations of floor levels? Do you have to carry something up or downstairs? What is the weather like? Is it hot, cold or humid? All of these things must be taken into consideration when you plan to carry a load. Once more, let's go over the principles of safe manual handling. 1. Assess, which is the task, the individual, the load and the environment. Broad, stable base. Bend your knees. Use a firm palm of grip. Keep your back in a natural position with your arms in line with the trunk of your body and keep the weight close to the centre of gravity and move your feet in the direction of movement. You can see here with the images on the left hand side. You must keep your head upright at all times. Your neck is part of your back. And again, please use your feet to change direction. Do not twist at the hips. There are 5 basic lifts. The lifting of all objects to or from, floor to bench, bench to height, pushing, pulling and team lifting. Some objects are awkward to lift. Good example of this would be a 21-foot scaffolding pole. Rather than walking up to the physical middle of the pole, what you need to do is bend down, pick up one end and work your way along until you come to the centre of its gravity and not necessarily the physical centre of the pole. When lifting things at height, still use your broad stable base. Keep your knees slightly bent so that when the object comes off the shelf, the forces travel down your body and are absorbed through your knees and passed out down through your feet. When a load is an awkward shape, position it on the floor before you lift it into a position that's going to be comfortable when you carry it. Do not lift it and then try to maneuver it while standing. This puts added pressure on your back. With pushing and pulling, keep your back straight, your elbows slightly bent, and use your legs to push or pull. Here is a guideline of lifting and lowering weights by work zones. There's a huge difference between what can be carried close to your body and what can be carried at arm's length. Thank you for your participation.